So my wife is about to hate me. Have you ever done one of those things that that you know you shouldn't do, but you're going to do it anyway? That's about to happen. We're supposed to go on a date tonight at 6 o'clock. We'll see if she actually goes with me. Think I'm joking. Here we go. It's going to happen. We have had rodents in our house for the past month. I know. We have lived in our house for 5 years. We have never had this problem. And suddenly, like 6 weeks ago, like we wake up and there's a half-eaten banana, there's stuff on the floor, and we're like, what is going on? One of our realtor friends who's running the board today, so if you need a house, she'll help you out. But she goes, have you had construction around you? And so we were like, yes. The rent house across the street started having, because she goes, that's where they came from. When they start doing construction, they scatter out of that house and move into a new house. And so they started to come into our crawl space and live there. And every once in a while, they pop up to say hi to my wife. My wife was not very friendly. She was not hospitable like she should be, right? And so I don't know if you've ever dealt with, this is my first go at it. I don't know if you've ever dealt with rodents in your house. But I think there's at least 2 ways to deal with rodents in your house. Approach number 1, I imagine, can be you can every morning clean the surfaces of your house. You can put the bananas away and you can mop and sweep, and you could basically be a butler to the rodents, right? Clean up after them and just make sure your house is sparkling every morning. Let me ask you a question you can answer to me. What's the problem with this approach? What's the problem? They're still there, right? They're still there. You didn't really solve the problem at all, right? So if you have a rodent problem, let me ask you this question. If you have a rodent problem, what do you need to do? You need to kill them jokers, right? Right? So the main issue is that we have one of those houses with a crawl space, right? Most of us have a crawl space here in Arkansas, right? And so what we did is we hired an exterminator to come out. And they put their traps out. And then I didn't trust that they were going to do everything they're supposed to do. So I ordered like 18 different kinds of traps on it, including the one with a little trap door on top of the bucket where you put food and they're supposed to fall in. I saw that. I was like, buying that didn't work, but I bought it, right? And we proceeded to, if you're a rodent lover, I'm sorry, we proceeded to kill every single one of them jokers. They are not available, they cannot come in my house. If you get rodents, you have to get under the floorboards and deal with the root of the problem. You following me? Right? You can't just clean on top. You have to get underneath the floorboards and deal with the root of the problem. The same is true when we're talking about unity. Everyone say unity. You see, everybody that we know longs for unity. Everybody. If you watch an NFL game this afternoon, as soon as I get out of the meeting after this, I'm going to go home and watch my blessed Steelers beat the Patriots down. I'm going to watch this amazing, amazing football game. And if you'll notice on the back of their helmets, they have little sayings. The little sayings say, end racism and stop hate and it takes all of us. And politicians during election season, right, will say, we must end the division and work across the what? Aisle, right? Here at church, we preach sermons. We're like, we need to be united. But here's the amazing thing. Everyone cries for unity, but we're all going to read the slogans on the back of the NFL players' helmets this afternoon. And we're going to listen to the politicians during election season. And we're going to listen to the amazing sermons that are delivered at the 1045 service, right? And what we're going to do is we're just going to return. Y'all know this is true. We're just going to return to the disunity, return to the division that we had before. Here's my question for you. Why? And the answer is this. All we're doing is cleaning the surface of the house and acting like that's enough. If you want to take care of disunity, if we want to take care of the disunity in Grace United that is here, that is present, that threatens to tear us apart, what we have to do is get underneath the floorboards and take care of the root problem. You follow me so far? You see, we're in a 3-week series on the vision of Grace United. And we say that the vision is basically this. What kind of disciples are we attempting to make here at Grace United? And our answer is this. At Grace United, we seek to make disciples that discover their identity in Jesus, live out their unity with one another, and serve in ministry to the world. And today, we are going to talk about unity. We're going to say unity, right? Everybody wants unity, but in order to get unity, we have to deal with what's underneath the floorboards, which is identity. Everyone say identity. All right. So here's the thing. This sermon's going to sound like an identity sermon. And if you went to the 9 o'clock last week, it's going to sound a lot like parts of the 9 o'clock. What I did is I took a little bit up and expanded it out because I want to deal with what's underneath the floorboards. Here's the deal. There's 3 ways to get your identity. 2 of them lead to disunity. They have to. There's only one way to get your identity that can lead to true unity. So the first thing I want you guys to learn today is this. All achieved identities lead to disunity. So in the parable, there are 2 sons, and both sons are trying to achieve their identity. One way that you try to get your identity is by being the older brother. Everyone say older brother. So in the parable, the younger brother comes home, and and his father throws a big party, and it says this: the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pled with him and said, but he answered his father. He said, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I've never disobeyed your orders. Do you hear his identity in his words? The older brother's identity is, look what I have accomplished for the family. Look at my obedience to expectations, right? If you came here last week, we called this letting others name you. Letting others name you. The older brother achieved his identity through obedience to cultural expectations. Many of us here in this room, your identity is a father first, or a mother first, or a son or a daughter first, or your political party is at your core, or your employee or your success is at your core. And if you do good, if you live up to your role, you achieve your identity, right? But here's one problem with that, and here's the problem. If you achieve your identity from living up to cultural standards, you have to look down on other people that don't. So we see this in the parable. It says, the father went out, pled with his son, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed your orders. You never give me even the young coat so I can celebrate with my friends. And then he says what? But when this son of yours who squandered your property comes home, you celebrate with him. The older brother got his identity by living up to cultural expectations. And by default, he had to look down on not only the brother who did not live up to cultural expectations, but to the father who accepted the brother who accepted cultural expectations. And we say, boo, older brother. Boo, older brother. We do this all the time. But you and I are the same. If you get your identity from being a hard worker, you have to look down on those that you consider lazy. If you get your identity from being a good mother, however you define that, or a good father, you have to look down on those people that don't meet your expectations. If you get your identity from being religiously obedient, coming to church week after week, month after month, serving on the whatever team at Grace United, and that is your identity, you have to look down on those people that aren't as involved as you are. Like the older brother, if you achieve your identity from living up to cultural standards, you have to look down on the people that are not. You see, all achieved identities lead to disunity. And here's the deal. We are Americans. We are Americans in 2022, and we're like, amen, Josh. We are not defined by those around us. We are not defined by cultural expectations. I get to define me. You know what? We're the younger brother. So let's talk about the younger brother. It starts like this. The parable starts like this. The younger brother said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. While the man's still alive, give me my share of the estate. What he's saying is this: I don't belong to you. I don't take your name. I don't take your expectations. I wish you were dead. He is the exact opposite of the older brother, right? His identity is rejecting cultural norms. His identity is a rejection of letting other people name him. He, the younger brother, gets his identity, achieves his identity from the rejection of cultural norms. This is the modern culture. No one has the right to name me. No one has the right to define me. What my feelings right now are what's true and what's defined me. No one else can put anything on me. This is Frozen. Let it go. Let it go. Don't turn around. You know, however the song goes, I don't know. My kids watch it, right? But don't be the good girl that they want you to be. Every Disney movie's like this, right? I don't care what they're going to say. It's all about me and my feelings and right there. Here's one problem with that. If you achieve your identity from rejecting cultural standards, you have to look down on people who don't. Remember the older brother? The older brother achieved his identity through living up to cultural expectations. So he had to look down on the younger brother who didn't achieve them, and he had to look down on the father who accepted the younger brother. The younger brother achieved his identity through rejecting cultural standards, and so he had to reject the father and the brother who lived up to them and upheld them. And we all say, boo, younger brother. Boo, younger brother. I don't know who says boo, but I say boo right now. Boo, younger brother. But here's the deal. We do this all the time. If you name yourself a liberal, open-minded person, then you have to feel superior to those that you consider to be narrow-minded bigots. If you think of yourself as progressive and moving with the times, you by your very nature have to look down and disunify with those that you think have outdated morals. And if you think of yourself as tolerant and accepting all no matter what, then you have to look down on those that you view to be intolerant and only semi-accepting. You see, here's the ironic thing. All achieved identities lead to disunity. It doesn't matter if your identity is achieved like the older brother, like living up to cultural standards, or by the younger brother by rejecting them. All achieved identities lead to disunity. They have to, by their very definition. But there's a third way to go about getting your identity, and that's this. Only a received identity can lead to unity. Everyone say unity. In the story, there's a third character, the father. And when the younger son comes back, it says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was what? Filled with what? For him. And he did what? He threw his arms around him and kissed him. Most of you, and I can say this with absolute certainty because I've seen your Facebooks, I've seen your Instagrams. If the younger son did to you what the younger son did to the father, you would cut this person out of your life, you would cancel them, you would never speak to them again. Like, I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. which means there's only 3 characters. If you're not like the Father, you're probably, that's a side note, but you're probably getting your identity from the other 2. But then the Son said to him, sorry, that hurt. Then the Son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven, I've sinned against you, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the Father said to his servants, quick, bring the robe, bring the ring, bring the sandals, bring the calf, let's have a feast. For the son of mine was dead, is alive again, he was lost and is found. So they began to do what? Celebrate. The Father did not reject the younger son. The Father did not disunify with the younger son. But here's the deal, the Father does it again. You see, when the older brother came, he became angry and refused to go. And notice that both the younger son and the older son are away from home. Did you notice that? They're both away from home, and the Father goes out to both. So the Father goes out, and the Father went out and pled with the younger son, because the father didn't reject the older brother because of disunity. The Father didn't reject the older brother because he was divisive. And the question is why, and the answer is simply this. Jesus is trying to show us an identity that can actually lead to unity. The Father has a received identity, not an achieved one. And it's an identity that most of us know about, but very seldom do we live into. Can I show you a Christian identity real quick? A Christian identity can be defined by the Romans Road. It's a way that people have shared the gospel for years. And it starts like this. For what? For all, and comes short of the glory of God. That's where, if you are a Christian, this is where your identity begins. It's not, I achieved something. It's, there was a standard, and I failed at that standard. God has a standard of holiness, and we all fall short. So Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is what? Death. That is what hangs over. If you are a believer, you fell short of achieving the identity. You fell short of achieving what God has standard for you, and the pronouncement upon us all is death, both spiritually and physically. But Romans chapter 5:8 says this, but when God demonstrated his own love toward us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ did what? We were supposed to die. But Jesus, God's Son, did it in our stead. He brought us grace. He brought us mercy. And Romans 10:9 says this, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be what? Listen, Christians, we are not saved because what we achieved. We are saved because what he achieved. We are not saved because we are great. We are saved because what? We are not saved because our name is great, but we're saved because what? His name is great. And if this is your identity, Christian, you have no room for rejecting because you weren't rejected. You have no room for judging because you weren't judged. You have no room for disunity because you weren't disunified with. Where you see, if at Grace United, we want to be unified. We can't just deal with the stuff on the surface. We can't just clean up after the mess day after day. We have to deal with what's underneath the floorboard, and that's our identity. And all achieved identities lead to disunity, then only received identity can lead to unity. And the reason that we do this is because Jesus prayed, just like in the first service. Jesus had a prayer. He said, my prayer is not for them alone. He's talking about the disciples that he was with. My prayer is not for them alone, but I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message that what? Maybe what? And he says, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us. Why? So that what? His prayer is that we may be unified so that the world will know that the Father sent the Son. Or in our context, may Grace United be unified so that Little Rock can look at us and see that the Jesus that they worship must be connected to God. And he goes on, he says, I've given them the glory. He's talking about you. I've given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be what? Just as we are what? I and them and you and me, so that they may be brought to what? And what's the result? Say it with me. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them, even if you loved me. So our unity, literally, Jesus says the unity of the church is the thing that will let people know outside of the church that this Jesus thing is for real. And if we are going to get unity at Grace United, there's only one way to do that. You need to have an identity based on receiving grace. I need to have an identity based on receiving grace. If you come to church, and here's your hallmark, if you can come to church week after week after week, and you go home and your thought the entire time is those people. Those people, right? A telltale sign, I'm telling you, I see it all the time on the internet. If you believe that you have Christianity figured out, you have the church figured out, and all those morons around you have no idea, if they just listen to you, then we would fix this. You do not have an identity based off of grace. You have an identity based off of achievement. You following me? The only way at Grace United that we are going to build a church that discovers their unity in Jesus, that lives out our unity with one another and serves the ministry to the world, is despite our racial differences, despite our economic differences, despite our political differences, despite our gender differences, despite our gifting differences, is if we all understand that our true identity is received by grace and grace alone. And if you have that, then you can look at the other and say, you are worthwhile. And I can unite with you. When I wrote this sermon, one group I kept thinking about is AA or NA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or Narcotics Anonymous, right? If you've ever walked into an AA meeting, you walk in and you say, hi, my name is Joshua, and I'm an alcoholic. Y'all are going to cut that out and put that on the internet, right? It's going to be, right. And Neil's going to walk in and say, hi, I am Neil. I am Baptist. I am not an alcoholic. And then he can judge me, right? But when you sit in an AA meeting, everyone starts with, I am broken, and I'm on the same level that all of you are. I think church is a little like that. I can walk into church and say, hi, my name is Joshua, and thank you. And I have fallen short of the glory of God. And the pronouncement upon my grievous sin was my death. But Jesus. But someone stepped in for me and said, I will take that sentence upon myself. And only through my connection through him am I here today. And here's the secret. If I walk into church every week like that, and you walk into church every week like that, and you walk into church every week like that, and you walk into church every week like that, and you walk into church every week like that, if we all walk in, say, my name is, and I am a sinner, but I am victorious in Jesus, look at what he did, then what we've done is we've taken care of what's underneath the surface. And then people won't walk into Grace United and say, it's full of hypocrites. People won't walk into Grace United and say, that church is full of phonies. People will walk into Grace United and say, that place is real. That's a place I can find a home, and that's a Jesus I can fall in love with.